Welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased today to be joined by my guest, Jonaed Iqbal, founder and CEO of NoDegree.com. How are you today, Jonaed?
I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me. And I look to provide a lot of value to your audience.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So, could you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I help people without college degrees find meaningful jobs that pay well. I'm the founder of NoDegree.com and host of the NoDegree Podcast, where I interview people without college degrees and have them share their stories. So it's something I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about the education, the career industry, because I think it has a lot of impact on people. And I just want to make a statement that I'm not anti education and I'm not anti degree. I just think people need to be smart about it. And I do think that sometimes the cost can get really excessive for some people.
Yeah, this is great work that you have been doing. And, in the current workforce, a lot of the responsibilities and requirements are actually like you said earlier can be acquired on the job, right? And
Yeah.
it's mainly skills based. And so tell us a little bit more about how you would coach the participants in your workshops and nodegree.com.
So a lot of it, I focus on content. But if I'm working with someone, I'll tell them to focus either get a certification, work on projects, read a lot of books, and be proactive. That I've seen a lot of people, right? They'll graduate college and they'll almost never read a book again.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that person more qualified and given preference over someone who may not have gone to college but has read a lot of books? So what I
Right.
would always tell people is like whatever you want to learn, make sure start reading industry news, start reading following industry trends, start reading the books, start following the authors, listen to podcasts. There's so many ways and it really differs by industry. Like if you want to learn sales, right? Maybe you want to start reading books on sales. Maybe you want to start selling small things. Maybe you want to get even like a small job where you're selling a little here and there and understanding the business. And the other thing is a lot of skills are transferable. So I'll work with a lot of people and kind of tell them to focus on the things that are transferable because collaboration, communication, how you manage situations. So there's so much. And, I'm really a big advocate of convincing companies to show that you got to look deeper because oftentimes they use they hire people based on signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
You went to college, you went to what school you went, what you majored in. But the fact is some people, some of the best candidates, right? The people who are the most passionate don't have those signals because let's say you've done something for 10 years and you're extremely passionate about a new area, right? You may not have the ability to go to school for 4 years, but you're doing everything you can in your time and you're doing whatever you can. These types of candidates, right? They're not that many, but they're high quality candidates that get eliminated because they don't meet the traditional candidate standards.
Mm-hmm. Right, especially in the current workforce, there are, based on the recent report, a large portion of our workforce, candidates who are approaching their retirement age, but they sort of postpone it, right, and continue in the workforce, and then acquiring new skills, reskilling, upskilling, or like you said, transitioning to completely different fields, and then the best way to learn is on the go, and then grasp as much various multiple aspects of what's needed as possible.
Yeah, you always have to spend time learning because it's like the things that were relevant 50 years ago are not as relevant today. If you look at the companies that were big even 10 years ago, it's a different
Mm-hmm.
thing and it'll be a different thing 10 years from now. So you always have to stay on the edge of your toes.
Right, well said. So based on our previous conversations that you were working as a actuarial
Yeah.
analyst
Yes.
before you venture into entrepreneurship and founded nodegree.com. Would you like to share a little bit of your
Yeah, so
experience?
look, I've always been an entrepreneur, right? Like resold sneakers. I sold phones, right? I used to buy phones on Craigslist and then I used to try to sell it, make like $30 because that was a lot of money in high school. I tutored, right? I went to a good high school and I was very good at math, so I used to tutor for
Uh-huh.
money and that's what I did for college. That's how I, you know, afforded things, paid for gas and stuff. And so I've always been an entrepreneur. I'm always thinking, reading, right? But I don't come from a wealthy family, so I couldn't afford to be an entrepreneur because I also didn't have I didn't have the idea that something scalable at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I found NoDegree.com in 2014 when I was actually in grad school in my second semester, and that's when I found it. So while I would love to work on it full time, it takes time to sort of build a company. I needed a job just to sort of get some money, get some savings. Parent thing too. Like I know my parents would have bothered me all the time, right? And so I kind of was thinking, I'll get a job and I'll build it on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an actuary, you have to study hundreds of hours for each exam. The first few exams take like 100 to 300 hours of studying. So I passed two exams. I passed one before I started working, one while I was working. Eventually, it came to a point where I figured out the business model. I figured out what I wanted to do. I was like, I needed to leave this industry because I could either spend hundreds of hours on a career that I was going to leave anyway, or
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of hours into my business. And I knew one I was more passionate about, and one it just made me happy. I was excited about. So I left to another job because it was just a regular 9 to 5 because I didn't have to study outside the job, right? I didn't have to study for exams 2 to 3 hours every night.
Mm-hmm.
Then I worked for a startup, and eventually I was just like, look, I got to do this full time. I cashed out my small retirement, not much, 20,000. I took the penalties and stuff. I lived at home, so that made a big difference. I tell a lot of people, if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, they come from pretty wealthy backgrounds. So do things to allow you to take more risk because entrepreneurship is risky. So if I had to pay rent, if I had to take care of certain things, I would not have been able to do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it took 18 months to really make money. I didn't really make money for the first 18 months. But then after that, I started making decent money.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, the first, obviously the first even few years for some entrepreneurs might be, a little tougher, right? But I resonate so much with you when you shared a little about your background growing up without that much of a, in terms of materials, right?
Yeah.
Without that much of a, financial support from family. I'm coming from a similar background that
Yeah.
kind of sort of shakes a little bit of the typical stereotypical the myth or imagination of Asians of
Yeah.
being well off or growing up in an affluent family has all
Yeah.
kinds of support, right? Yeah, I mean, especially you figure out everything on your own, and I'm just curious how you come up in like sort of constructing your business model.
So I was on Reddit in 2014. Someone asked, for those of you without a college degree who make over six figures, what do you do and how'd you get the job? And people are like, I'm a claims adjuster, I'm an x-ray technician, I'm this type of
Mm-hmm.
technician, I'm a surveyor, I'm an elevator repair person. And none of these jobs, like, people don't grow up and say, I want to be a claims adjuster when I grow up. I want to survey highways when I grow up, right? People say doctor, lawyer, engineer, bus driver, whatever, police officer.
Right.
So I was thinking about, and all the answers, they talked about how they got these jobs. It was like my uncle, my cousin, my friend,
Mm-hmm.
my teacher. They came to
Ah.
my school. It was all right place, right time. It was not
Mm-hmm.
like I researched this career and this is how I got it. So I was thinking, like, why can't I be that uncle, cousin, or friend? Why can't I be the person who teaches them? Because what I found is a lot of people just don't know about the opportunities. Like, I've worked in fast food. I've worked like I worked at Popeyes in the ninth grade. I worked at like the Barnes and Nobles cafe where I made the little Starbucks drinks. And there were plenty of people who were very hardworking,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
But they just didn't know about a lot of opportunities out there, right? Like sometimes even getting a job as a security guard, where you have just you get a few dollars more an hour, and you get some things, you get overtime. They just didn't know about these opportunities. So I was like, why can't I be the person that teaches these people about opportunities? Because the thing is, look, Google is a very powerful search engine, but a search engine is as powerful as the person doing the searching. So if you don't know what to search, you how do you search something you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you know, hey, I want to be an X-ray tech, I can start a certification, I can search the process. But if you don't know that's a job that you can realistically get, you're not going to search for it in the first place. So then I
Right.
was like, I need to become a content create. I need to create a lot of content. Need to learn marketing. Need to learn SEO, and that then you just go down a rabbit hole that could take I could speak hours about.
That's a wonderful experience and helping the large workforce finding their calling, right?
Yeah.
Without even themselves knowing that they could do it. I think that's like magic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to circle back about what we talked about earlier when I shared a little bit about my experience in growing
Yeah.
up without lot, right? I had
Yeah.
to basically worked hard and then
Yeah.
fight your way and then,
Yeah. I had to
become
fight.
sort of something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be independent, not have to, rely on, well, there's nothing to rely on really,
Yeah.
right? Um, yeah. So have you noticed anything, in, collaborating, sort of connecting the workforce with employers? Is there anything like, let's just say surrounding, Asian community that seems a little bit alarming to you?
Yeah, you know what it is? So I'll tell you, one thing I see a lot of people in the Asian community, personally I experience, and this, and it's also the general job seeking community, is that the soft skills are not worked on. Because a lot of time, what do my parents say? Go to a good school, do good in school, all these hard things, get good grades, study, study, study. They don't say learn how to present, learn how to communicate, learn how to relate to people. So a lot of job seekers, they'll do these things and then realize, like, you have to know how to interview, you have to know how to get referrals, you have to know how to connect with people. And what I've
Mm-hmm.
seen is a lot of younger people don't know how to have conversations with people older than them and who are in mentorship positions. Like, I'll tell you, I mentor a lot of kids and I literally tell them, please reach out if you need help with your resume. I won't charge you. Like, I met you in a different capacity, you're not a
Mm-hmm.
client. Like, none of them reach out. And that's a big thing. Like, only a handful reach out, or they'll reach out like a year later after I find out they're working like fast food or something, and I'll be like, "Why are you
Mm-hmm.
working there? Like, I could have got you like an office job. I could have got you something that's working for your future." So a lot of times they just don't reach out to people in their circle, right? And they don't know how to ask them questions. Like, I'll literally tell them, "Look, if you ask me, like, I in my head I'm thinking, just ask me, because the thing is, I don't like necessarily giving unsolicited advice as much, because what happens is I used to do it a lot. It just goes in one ear out the other. So when people ask, I'm ready to give. But if you don't ask, so that's one thing I kind of see. The other thing, unfortunately, I've seen this in hiring. You're Asian, and I was even reading something today that
Okay.
there's a lot of discrimination and there's a lot of bias in hiring, right? There's a lot of things you go online. If you look at leadership positions, like Asians will get a lot of positions, but they can't, they talk about the bamboo ceiling, right? It's
Right.
interesting. The person who wrote the book, The Bamboo Ceiling, went to my high school and I connected with her on LinkedIn, right? Janet Young.
Jen,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So she's going to be on my live show in, some part of 2022 or something. She's pretty busy. But a lot
Awesome.
of people have to realize these things. And it's tough. It's sad because, look, I used to be an actuary and I used to see the Asians, they used to have 4 or 5 exams, right? And these are people who are looking for their first jobs, not even internships, right? They have 2, 3 internships, and they're still struggling to land a job. And then I've seen people who are, white, 1, 2 exams, no internships, or maybe one internship, and
Mhm.
they're landing a job, right? I even saw it. Like, I gave a resume to someone that I worked with, who's the head of the program. I handed the resume. The person had 2 exams, didn't even get an interview, right? And it's okay. I
Mhm.
understand if they don't pass the interview. They didn't even. Then I found out someone who was no exams got an internship, and then you really start to think, like, what is it? Like, how does that happen? And I've seen people who was like, they're trying to break into the financial space, right? And if you're Asian, they're all like Harvard, Columbia, Yale, right? PhDs, masters, and then you'll see like white people from a different demographic. They'll see University of Nebraska, and
Mhm.
look, I'm not like they have to go to a certain school, but when these are the metrics that you're using to judge everybody, and I'm not a big fan of those metrics, right? There are
Mhm.
multiple ways to judge, but when these are the metrics, it's hard to kind of compete when people are playing a different game. Like, I've seen all the time where, there are resume studies for names, right? If you have, I've seen people do it. Like, they change their name, they've whitewashed their
Right.
names,
Right.
right? Like, they changed their name to Jay, right? Like, I've never changed my name, but they changed their name to Jay, and something like that, and all of a sudden they get more interviews, and it's really sad that people
Mhm.
have to do that. So, what I encourage a lot of people to do is really work on those soft skills, right? Really work on those communication skills. Really build your network. Really start connecting with people, because the only way to sort of solve it is to get up into those positions so that it is normal, so that when you do have power and you can make hiring decisions, that you are more fair. Because the fact is, most people, they tend to refer their friends, and most people's friends are the same race as them. They refer to people who went to their schools and their sororities and frats
Mm-hmm.
who are the same race as them. So a lot of time it's just due to the nature of things, right? It's not like people are outright racist, but it's this bias who they hang out with. So you have to kind of get involved, right? Get referrals, connect with people to really make a difference. It's sad, but it takes time to sort of make change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, when you mentioned about the candidates, right, into job seekers whitewash their names, changing them from their original name. For example, their parents or their friends call them to something that's more within the Western culture. For example, Jane, John,
Yeah.
Emily, right? Very Anglo-Saxon names,
Yeah.
right? That's within the target culture. And then sometimes they put in a preferred name or
Yeah.
nickname, but in official documents, it's their still original name.
Yeah.
It's just really sad. For people from the minority group have to go through that to sort of get not ahead even, just sort of get similar,
Yeah.
interviewing opportunities in the first place.
No, it's
Yeah,
sad
so
because it's like, you don't need to believe me. Just Google resume studies. What they do is they take the same exact resumes, they change the name, and then they do studies and they have statistical value, right? They apply to new jobs, and all of a sudden there are more callbacks, and then it happens to a lot of black people. I was reading one thing today that a black person with a felony, I mean, a white person with a felony has a higher chance of getting a job than a black person with experience and no felony. And then at that point, it's like such a different game. How do you compete? It's like the example I give is you're studying as hard as you can, and you find out the teacher gives the test bank with the questions to someone. And
mhm.
some people say work hard, but it's really hard when some people are just they're starting
Right,
close to home plate and you're
right.
starting behind home plate. It's so hard to compete.
Right. It's like in a running race and people
Yeah,
already half over,
yeah,
to the finishing line, then we just, get started there at the
yeah,
beginning. Yeah, totally. When, it's kind of like a systematic and a structural change needs to be made, needs to be
yeah.
transformed, right? And then the certain criterias, hidden, right? Very, very invisible criterias
It's
people hold.
invisible, so it's so hard to kind of
Exactly.
see. And the thing is, invisible things. That's why, like things like mental health and all that stuff, they're kind of hidden. But when you look at the beauty is they can be quantified because you can take
Mhm.
large data sets and look at the trends, and then it. Then you start seeing patterns, and then from those patterns, but the hard thing is, it's really hard to pinpoint on an individual level. Like, was this person or this and that? And I mean, sometimes you can blatantly see it. Like I've seen it all the time, where it's like,
Mhm.
some bosses they only promote all their interns are pretty females, right? And it's
Oh, wow.
obvious, right? I've seen it happen, right? And some companies are known for sort of having a certain industries, right? And it's just unfortunate that there's this bias, but we just have to do our part to just make sure we get into positions and don't replicate that bias.
Exactly, especially for HR professionals, right? There's a large percentage of the dominant culture, basically
Yeah,
white people in
yeah,
hiring industry. Obviously there's a higher, like you said earlier, what they have experienced based on where they grew up, their background, their cultural
yeah,
background, right? People they interact with. If you don't know many people from minority groups, people of color, people from speaking different
yeah,
languages with multiple cultural backgrounds, really you will feel like you're
yeah,
like likely to get
yeah, yeah,
interviewed,
yeah,
even though it's a qualified, glamorous,
yeah, yeah.
credentials, right?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean it's so true. Like I've seen it, and like my friend worked at an organization, and they asked the interview, hey, we want to be more diverse and hire a
Mhm.
different cool, and we keep on getting a similar type of candidate. She just straight up told him, he's like, you got to stop hiring white guys, and it got awkward, but she was correct, right? In the sense of, like, you tend to only hire like a certain group of people, and it has to change, right? And it's not
Right.
like saying don't hire white people. It's just
Exactly.
be just more open to realizing that. And honestly, I think like you got to think about the thing. So names cause bias. So when people look
Mhm.
at resumes, chop out the names, chop it off. Like, just don't check, so that when you do select, I like this resume, I like this.
Mhm.
um and another thing is there's also bias, and I was reading for law firms, right? What they do is, yes, you could go to the same law school or whatever, but then they look at your activities. So they start choosing people who did horseback riding or who played crew versus if you did track or you did certain things. So it's just sad how bias, like, you have to think about what triggers this bias and then try to remove it, because unfortunately, look, we are all biased in some capacity, unfortunately, right? We try our best to be better, so it's best to make better decisions. We want to, like, remove the bias and figure out the triggers that cause bias so that it can be a more fair process.
Exactly. Yeah, talking about bias, I was reading the other study. I was actually conducted in a Canadian university talking about reviewing basically a group of people as a focus group, reviewing like the audio sound recordings of
Yeah,
interviewees and candidates, and then determining if they are basically if they're actually Canadians or
yeah,
North Americans, right? And then before they know their names, every 99% are rated like, oh yeah, native speaker, English speaker, from Canada or from
yeah,
US. But once they realize, so the next step is they are reviewed
yeah.
of the candidates names, and
Ah,
those with Asian names within the AAPI community are rated much lower in terms of whether they're likely to
yeah,
be
yeah,
considered native speakers. But actually in reality, they are born and raised there, they speak perfect
yeah, yeah,
English.
yeah,
It's just, yeah, like you said, with the name somehow
yeah.
compare before and afterwards, the sound recording is the same.
Yeah, I've seen it all the time. Like, they say to review a piece, and it's written by a man and once by a woman, and all of a sudden they find more errors in the woman. They don't rate
Uh-huh.
it as high, so it's tough. Like, it's a long road. Like, it's not something that'll be fixed overnight. It's something that's always a work in progress. And that's like one thing for my company is like a lot of discrimination comes from just people how they grew up. Right, a lot of people who go to college tend to come from middle class backgrounds or higher, or they have a support system. Like, who knows where I would be if my parents didn't value education, if they didn't send me to tutoring. Like, I've seen it time and time again. Like, there are parents who simply don't value education and they actively work against you. It's tough,
Mm.
right? So it's
Yeah,
like,
that's sad.
and sometimes it's hard, right? If you have good parents, because I know parents who pay over $100 an hour for tutoring,
Mm-hmm.
and those kids, they end up, okay. Like, they never have to worry. They don't have to worry about financial things. They don't have to worry. But if you don't have that, what do you do? You right? You're literally starting behind, right? Because they
Right,
show
right.
that even from preschool, they can predict a lot of things. Like, what preschool you go to determines like where you get, and it just shows how things start so early.
Right, right. Like you have to go to the right, like
Yeah,
elementary school, middle school, high school, right? That was
yeah.
the maybe the feeders for the Ivy League and
So
all
I
that.
think the schools aren't as important as the parents and the investments
Their
of the parents.
connections.
The parents, like, if you have a parent that's willing to spend that much money, they're a certain type of parent that values a certain thing and they truly care about your future. So I think that's even more important in the school. So it's like the type of parents who thinks about sending their kid to the right preschool is already the type of
Hmm.
parent who's making sure that they're doing XYZ, that everything's
Right.
taken care of, who has money, who has time, who has resources. I think that's like the bigger indicator than even the school, right? Because a lot of things, it's just their parents really have a big impact on where you end up in life.
Hmm. Right. Too bad that not every person in this whole wide world have that luxury of
Yeah,
being born into the right family with that right resources, right connections,
yeah.
network.
No, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it was awesome. It was wonderful talking with you, and then thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your insights, and perspectives with our audience.
No, thank you
Um,
so much. I hope the audience finds it, valuable. I hope they can do their own research, and I hope they can
mhm.
take the information and either, if they're in a managerial position, really change things, or if they're not, they understand what they are up against and what they can do to set themselves apart. Because look, while it is tough, it is still possible. And unfortunately, yes, these are valid, things that you can say, but at the end of the day, it's like, just work harder to sort of get these positions, because at the end of the day, you sort of, once you get into those positions, you can make such a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. Once we ascend, we can help make the world a better place,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Audience, please sharpen, any skills that you need, right? Social skills, leadership skills, and also be sure to ask for help when needed. Because,
Yeah.
all of us out there, right, are willing to help as much as we could. If we couldn't, we're happy to get you connected.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
yeah.
also, I want to give an offer to your audience. If, again, I have a podcast, so feel free to listen to NoDegree Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I've had all sorts of people talk about their career journeys. I've had people who worked at large companies. Like I have one of them who worked at Twitter, right, without a college degree. So
Right.
they talk about how they moved up. And so, I'm expanding that. And then also, if they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just, search up my name. I'm
Mhm.
more than happy. Just let me know you listen to, this podcast, and I'm more than happy to sort of at least guide you in the right direction.
Awesome, wonderful. I was just about to ask you how we can get connected with you.
Yeah, I've done enough
Thank you for
podcasts that
offering.
I know I've done enough podcasts that I know that's coming next.
Thank you so much again, Jonaed. Much appreciated your time and efforts. And well, audience, we look forward to talking with Jonaed again, hopefully soon in the near future.
Yeah, I'm always
Thank,
here. I'm always a message away.
thank you. Thank you all for listening. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.